What are cryptids and what is folklore? At first glance, this might seem like a topic that can be summed up with a couple of definitions, but if you've been following my channel, or even if this is your first time, this video is more than just a lesson. It's almost a foundation, a prerequisite if you will, for understanding not only what I do here, but why folklore and cryptids deserve far more respect than they usually get. You see, somewhere along the way, folklore started being treated like a synonym for fairy tale, and cryptid became shorthand for imaginary monster. But that's not accurate, not at all. In fact, several creatures we now recognize as real were once dismissed as cryptids. Does that mean every cryptid is real? Of course not. But it also doesn't mean that they are all fake. There's a gray area, a mysterious, fascinating in-between where many of these beings dwell. That's what this video is about. So let's start with the definition. According to the Oxford Dictionary, folklore is the traditional beliefs, customs, and stories of community passed through the generations by word of mouth. That's it. That's the whole meaning, and yet we treat the word like it's a synonym for make-believe. But consider this. Imagine your mom or dad tells you a story about how back in the day they were working at a grocery store bagging food for customers, and one day someone handed them a $100 bill just to be kind. Years later, you pass that story on to your own kids, not because it's dramatic or magical, but because it means something. Maybe it's a lesson in kindness or just a funny little slice of life. Now, did that really happen? Only your parent would know, but the story, it's been passed down from word of mouth, which means it's folklore. That simple story fits the very definition of folklore. It's not a bedtime fairy tale, it's a human experience passed from one generation to the next. So when people casually dismiss folklore as hokey superstition, they're not just being cynical, they're being culturally disrespectful, especially to indigenous communities whose traditions and stories are often written off as exactly this way. Think about your own family. If you have parents or grandparents with wild-sounding stories, are they lying? Or are they sharing something they believe, something they lived through, something important enough to pass on? Calling it just folklore doesn't make it false. It just means it came from people who didn't write their history in books. And that brings us to cryptids. Many so-called cryptids have deep roots in folklore. Take Bigfoot, for example. Stories of large, hairy, human-like creatures stretch across multiple Native American traditions. But it's not just the monsters. Animals we do recognize like coyotes, foxes, owls, and others were once considered supernatural or mythical in different cultures. If someone said that they didn't believe in the colugo, a gliding mammal related to primates that lives in Asia, you might assume it's a cryptid. Now imagine an indigenous elder tells you about the colugo, adding that their tribe believes it has healing powers and shares that belief through generations. Suddenly, not only is this animal dismissed, but the culture is too. And this is where the damage happens, not just to our understanding of nature, but to our respect for human history. We have to remember, we don't know everything. The United States is only about 250 years old. The oldest known written texts are around 5,500 years. The internet, which feels like it's always been around, has only been around for about 30-something years. That's nothing in the grand scope of time. It sounds made up, but the colugo is very real. So when we say things like, that's just folklore, or that's just a cryptid, what we're really doing is pretending that modern science, in its relatively short existence, has already discovered all that there is to know. And that's not just wrong, it's downright arrogant. Now let's zero in on the word cryptid, because this is where I might step on a few toes. The definition of a cryptid is an animal whose reported existence is unproven, often found in folklore or anecdotal accounts, but not recognized by science. And there's that word again, folklore. We've already established that folklore doesn't automatically mean fiction, but let's take that understanding one step further, because some of the weirdest, wildest animals you've ever heard of, they used to be considered cryptids. In fact, one of the most famously bizarre creatures was once thought to be a complete hoax. If you already know what I'm talking about, pause the video and drop your guess down in the comments. I'll give you a moment. It's the platypus. This egg-laying mammal from Australia has a duck's bill, a beaver's tail, and the body of an otter. It has webbed feet, waterproof fur, and glides effortlessly through fresh water. Today, we know it's real, but when Western scientists first saw it, they thought it was a taxidermy prank, a Frankenstein mashup, a joke. But it wasn't, and neither were the Komodo dragon, the okapi, the giant squid, the bandagazoo, kangaroos, or even gorillas. All of them were once dismissed as fantasy, myth, or misidentification until they were proven to exist. What does that tell us? It tells us that calling something a cryptid doesn't mean it's fake. It just means science hasn't caught up yet. Here's the problem. The public perception of cryptids has been hijacked by cartoons, hoaxers, and reality shows that treat the entire field as a punchline. People stomping around the woods in camo, yelling into the dark, hoping to lure a shy, intelligent creature out with whoops and hollers. And not to mention those god-awful recordings. I mean, honestly, just think about if this was your language and something had a recording of a person just saying, "Hello. Hello. Hello." And you're out there in the dark of the night. Would you really want to go towards that voice? I don't think so. Even people I respect like Coyote Peterson have played into this. He released a Bigfoot skull video that he later clarified was fake, and I watched it because I like the guy, but still, it was another drop in a bucket full of mockery. And every time this happens, serious cryptozoological research takes another hit. If we ever want to make real progress in this field, we need serious, dedicated researchers, people willing to spend weeks at a time in remote areas studying tracks, sounds, and patterns with the patience of a wildlife biologist, not the theatrics of a reality TV cast. Because let's be honest, if Bigfoot is real, cable television isn't going to be the one to prove it. But in order to narrow this down to one cryptid specifically, let's go with Bigfoot. Bigfoot, I don't believe he's some magical forest guardian. It's not an alien, not a ghost. It's likely just a highly intelligent primate. And if that's the case, then we already have fossil evidence of something very similar, Gigantopithecus, whose bones have been discovered in China. That species existed. It was real. We don't need to see living dinosaurs to believe they once walked the earth. We accept their fossils as proof, so why not apply the same logic to Sasquatch? If indigenous stories across North America speak of large hairy forest beings, and if fossil evidence of giant primates exists elsewhere in the world, then it's not unreasonable to wonder if the two are connected. Maybe Bigfoot isn't a myth, maybe it's a dying species, or maybe it's already gone, but that doesn't make it fake. And here's the bigger question. If something as massive and powerful as a 7-foot tall ape could live undetected in the forests of North America, what else might be out there? What about the stories of little people, Pukwudgies, the Yunwi Junzi, the Joga, even the Kentucky Goblins? Tales of small elusive creatures passed down for generations. Could they be hiding in the shadows, watching the loud, towering humans with quiet curiosity? Are they real? Misunderstood? Extinct? Maybe we'll never know, but that's the magic of folklore and cryptids. They keep us curious, humble, and willing to look just a little bit deeper into all of the incredible mysteries of the world, and where mysteries lie, adventure awaits.